Rafael Nadal, a retired legend and 22-time Grand Slam champion, reportedly spent $10,000 simply to sit in the stands and watch Alex Eala compete. The tennis world was stunned. But why would the King of Clay pay that kind of money for a player he once trained for free? This is not just a story about a ticket. This is the story of a mentor, a prodigy, a nation's hope, and the moment the entire tennis world paused and asked the same question: who exactly is Alex Eala? By the end of this, you will understand exactly why Rafael Nadal calls this 20-year-old Filipino one of the most special players he has ever encountered, and why the rest of the world is only now beginning to catch up to what he recognized years ago. There are players who find tennis, and then there are players tennis finds. Alex Eala was born on May 23, 2005, in Quezon City, Philippines, a nation where basketball is religion and boxing is culture, where professional world-class tennis had virtually no history at the highest level. No Filipino had ever reached a Grand Slam singles main draw in the Open era. No Filipino had ever broken into the WTA Top 50. Nobody had done what this young woman was about to do. She was barely 10 years old when she first crossed paths with the Nadal family. It was not at a tournament or an elite academy tryout. It happened at a clinic held at her school in Manila, where Tony Nadal, Rafael's legendary uncle and longtime coach, was present. Among a crowd of wide-eyed young kids, a small girl from Quezon City walked up and hit a few balls with the man who helped shape one of the greatest athletes in history. She would later laugh about it in an interview, recalling that there is actually a video of it on YouTube and that Tony fed her a few balls while he was in Manila. She acknowledged he probably does not remember, but she insists it happened. She insisted it happened, and so did everything that followed. By age 12, Eala had packed her bags, said goodbye to her family, and moved to Mallorca, Spain, to join the Rafa Nadal Academy, a place built on clay courts, relentless discipline, and the conviction that greatness is not given, it is earned. Drill by drill, point by point, day by unforgiving day. She spent 6 years inside those walls. 6 years away from home. 6 years training in a country whose language was not her own, chasing a dream her nation had never seen fulfilled. She won the Junior Australian Open Doubles title in 2020, the Junior French Open Doubles in 2021, and then in 2022 made history by winning the Junior US Open Singles title, becoming the first Filipino ever to do so. But junior titles are one thing. Professional tennis is another universe entirely. The question that followed Eala out of the academy in 2023 was the same one that trails every prodigy who leaves the safety of a training system. Could she do it for real? The answer was coming, and it would shake the sport. Consider this. How many players in history have trained 6 years within the Nadal system and emerged ranked 140th in the world at age 19? And how many of those players then walked into one of the biggest tournaments on the calendar as a wild card and turned it completely upside down? March 2025. The Miami Open. One of the most prestigious WTA 1000 events on the calendar, a tournament that has witnessed Serena Williams, Steffi Graf, and every legend the sport has ever produced. Ranked 140th, Eala arrived on a wild card, an invitation extended by tournament organizers who perhaps saw something in her that the rankings could not yet reflect. Nobody anticipated what came next. In her opening match, she defeated American Katie Volinets, clean and composed, 6-3, 7-6. The tennis world barely registered it. Wild card wins happen. Then came Elena Ostapenko, a former French Open champion with a forehand capable of dismantling any opponent. Eala won 7-6, 7-5. People started paying closer attention. Then came Madison Keys, the reigning Australian Open champion, ranked 5th in the world. The kind of player wildcards simply do not beat. Eala won 6-4, 6-2. It was not even close. The tennis world was now fully, urgently awake. And then fate, with the dark humor it reserves for sport's most dramatic moments, placed Iga Swiatek across the net in the quarterfinals. Swiatek, the world number 2, a 5-time Grand Slam champion, the most dominant force in women's tennis over the previous 3 years. What made it even more remarkable was that Swiatek had attended Ayala's graduation ceremony from the Nadal Academy 2 years earlier, invited personally by Rafa himself. They had shared a genuine moment on that day, the champion honoring the graduate. Now, 2 years later, on one of the biggest stages in women's tennis, they met again as opponents. Ayala won 6-2, 7-5. The Philippines erupted. The tennis world fell silent for a moment, that particular electric silence that precedes an eruption. Rafael Nadal, watching from retirement, went to social media immediately. He expressed that he was extremely proud of her, called it an incredible tournament, and urged her to keep dreaming. Ayala would eventually fall in the semi-finals to Jessica Pegula, but that detail almost felt beside the point. In a single week, a 19-year-old wildcard from a country with no professional tennis tradition had defeated 3 Grand Slam champions and become the highest-ranked Filipino player in WTA history. And somewhere in Mallorca, at the academy he had built, Rafael Nadal was already making plans. Here is what most people missed in the aftermath of Miami. Nadal did not simply post his congratulations and move on. He was watching closely, far more closely than anyone realized. And what he chose to do next is where this story becomes truly extraordinary. The summer and fall of 2025 were a whirlwind for Ayala. She reached her first WTA final at Eastbourne in June. She claimed her first WTA 125 title in Guadalajara in September. She broke into the top 50. She made her Grand Slam main draw debut at the French Open and won her first match there. A historic moment. The first Filipino in the Open era to win a Grand Slam singles main draw match. At the 2025 Southeast Asian Games in Thailand, she won gold in the women's singles, ending the Philippines' 26-year drought in that event. The match featured 3 disputed line calls, a mid-match request to replace the linesperson, and an atmosphere that felt less like a regional games and more like a championship final. Even in the middle of all that, Ayala remained composed under pressure that would have unraveled many other players. And through every match, every milestone, every historic first, one man in retirement never stopped watching. On November 19, 2025, exactly 1 year to the day of his retirement from professional tennis, Rafael Nadal stepped back onto a court. Not for a comeback, not for an exhibition. He walked onto the courts of his own academy in Mallorca, picked up a racket, and practiced with Alex Eala. He shared the video with his 14 million followers, writing that 1 year later it felt wonderful to be back on a tennis court, that it was great to practice with her, and that next time he would be stronger. The internet responded immediately. But what came next was something nobody had anticipated. According to reports that spread rapidly through tennis media and fan communities, Nadal had not only been following Ayala's matches from home. He had quietly arranged to attend one of her key matches in person. Given his profile and the circumstances, standard ticketing was not an option. VIP arrangements had to be made at short notice, and the cost was reported at approximately $10,000. Ayala had spoken earlier in the year about the first private message Nadal ever sent her. She recalled it was the first time he had ever messaged her personally, so seeing his name in her notifications was a genuine shock. She admitted she only saw the message a couple of days later. That detail alone says everything. Here is a 20-year-old from Manila, ranked inside the top 50, so consumed by the demands of building a professional tennis career that she missed a private message from Rafael Nadal for 2 full days. And here is the greatest clay court player of all time, a man who could go anywhere and do anything, choosing to pay $10,000 to sit in a stadium and watch her compete. That is not merely mentorship. That is belief. The kind of faith that champions recognize in one another across generations. The tennis world had plenty of thoughts in response, and not all of them were generous. When the story circulated through tennis media and mainstream sports coverage, the reaction split in a way that revealed more about how the tennis establishment treats newcomers than it revealed about Ayala herself. Filipino fans flooded social media with a pride that was difficult to quantify. In a country where tennis has always existed at the margins of sporting culture, the image of the sport's greatest retired champion paying out of pocket to watch their player compete carried a weight that went far beyond rankings and titles. But criticism came quickly from other corners. Analysts pointed to the most vulnerable part of her game, her serve. At the Dubai Tennis Championships quarterfinals in February 2026, she lost to Coco Gauff 6-0, 6-2. Tennis observers were blunt, noting she won just 32% of points behind her first serve and 40% behind her second, and making clear that those numbers would not be sufficient against the very best players in the world. Questions about her fitness followed. At just 20 years old, signs of fatigue were being scrutinized in ways that felt to many of her supporters both legitimate and premature. Some critics asked a sharper question entirely. Was Nadal's very public devotion to Eala, broadcast to tens of millions of followers, adding pressure to a young player still developing her game rather than helping her? Others went further, suggesting that the $10,000 ticket story was being used to overstate her place in the tennis hierarchy. She had beaten Swiatek once. She had won a WTA 125 title. She was ranked somewhere between 40th and 50th in the world, remarkable for a Filipino player, but, in global terms, still an emerging talent, not the finished product that some narratives seem to be constructing. The SEA Games incident in December 2025 added further complexity. After 3 consecutive disputed line calls in the women's singles final, Eala formally requested that the umpire replace the linesperson, a rare and bold move at that level. She won the match and the gold medal, but the incident traveled well beyond Southeast Asian sports coverage and invited debate about both her composure and the appropriateness of the request. The whispered question in tennis circles became harder to ignore. What if all of it, Nadal's endorsement, the historic firsts, the national pride, the $10,000 ticket, what if it was simply too much, too soon? But here is what those critics were not accounting for. When Eala sat down at a press conference in Abu Dhabi in early 2026 following her practice session with Nadal, she was asked what it felt like to share a court with the man whose academy had shaped her. She said it was extraordinary and that she had been genuinely nervous. She noted it was physically demanding even though he had been away from tennis for a year. She said simply being able to say she had trained with Rafa felt incredible and that she felt very fortunate and grateful. She added that he told her it is important to surround yourself with good people and that beyond that advice, he also shared specific observations about her game. He told her things about her game. He did not show up merely to celebrate. He showed up to teach. The $10,000 was not a fan buying a memory. It was a mentor continuing an investment he had begun in a young player before she was even old enough to hold a professional license. The money was irrelevant to Nadal. What mattered was the message it sent, to Eala and to the world. Eala herself had once said of Nadal that he is so grounded, that he has achieved more than she could ever dream of, and that the fact he remains so genuinely kind to everyone around him is something she finds deeply admirable. That is the nature of real mentorship. It does not end when the formal arrangement concludes. Eala graduated from the Nadal Academy in 2023. The contract was complete. The official relationship was finished. And yet Nadal kept sending messages. He kept posting public congratulations. He returned to a tennis court for the first time in a year, not for a comeback, not for a commercial deal, but to share that court with her. And when attending a major match required $10,000 in arrangements, he paid it without hesitation. Because Rafael Nadal, who built an entire career on an almost supernatural belief in hard work, resilience, and the long game, recognized something in Eala that no serve statistic or ranking number can capture. He recognized the mentality. The girl who ran after him through Madrid airport just to say hello. The girl who moved to Spain at 12 and spent 6 years grinding on clay courts far from her family. The girl who walked into Miami ranked 140th as a wild card and simply refused to be eliminated by anyone who stood in her way. The girl who, even in a final disrupted by bad line calls, kept her composure and won the gold medal. That is not talent alone. That is character. And Nadal, more than almost anyone in the history of this sport, knows exactly what character looks like in a young player. He also knows what the journey demands. He knows that losses, serve struggles, and fitness concerns are not fatal. He endured his own trials. He spent years being told his game was too physically demanding to last, that his topspin was too extreme, that his left-handed setup was a novelty. He won 22 Grand Slams. When Nadal looks at Alex Eala, he is not evaluating who she is right now. He is seeing who she is becoming. And that, far more than any ticket price, is the real story. Here we are, March 2026. Indian Wells. The Sunshine Swing. The most significant stretch of the WTA calendar outside of the Grand Slams. Eala is ranked in the 40s. She just defeated a top 10 player in Dubai. She is rising faster than her critics can keep pace with. From a clinic in Manila to the courts of Mallorca. From a wild card ranked 140th to the top 50 in the world. From a girl who once chased Rafa Nadal through an airport to a player that same Rafa Nadal now chases across stadiums, spending $10,000 simply for the privilege of watching her compete.